Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. I'm Brian here with Andre, and Randy's back. How are you, Randy? How you feeling?
Feeling pretty great. How are you feeling?
Pretty good, pretty good. What's going on, Andre?
I'm doing good. I'm feeling well too, since everybody's feeling good.
Yeah, I don't know why StreamYard, but you all both are blurry. I don't know if there's something going on with the platform or what, but hopefully it doesn't affect the show too much. So in today's episode, guys, we're going to talk about some recent cybersecurity developments affecting various sectors. We're going to talk about phishing attacks mimicking the post office. We're going to talk about sophisticated ransomware exploiting web browsers. And we're going to update everybody on a significant security lapse that resulted in the Change healthcare ransomware attack. And each of these segments, we're going to discuss the vulnerabilities, but we're also going to talk about measures for enhancing cyber resilience, either helping you mitigate these threats or protect yourself a little bit better than maybe the companies that we're highlighting today who probably got attacked or were attacked. But we are experts in cybersecurity. We do bring you this podcast every week, and we don't bore you with ads, or we don't run any promotions during this podcast. We just bring you current events around cybersecurity, and we help you relate it to your own life, how it can affect you personally, or maybe where you work, or how, or some other way it could impact your life. We've seen enough healthcare and mortgage companies to know that a lot of Americans get affected when a lot of this stuff happens. So in return for us doing this and giving you this content for free, we ask that you help us grow the show by sharing our show, liking where you can, commenting, and just helping us out whatever way you can in terms of liking, sharing, and doing all that social media stuff. Makes sense, right, guys? That's kind of what we're asking for. Anything you want to add to that?
That's all we ask for.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say it's free, but it's free like free beer, not free like worthless. So we don't charge for it, but we want you that are listening to get tons of value out of this. We want it to be a very valuable asset for you as you make business decisions.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Randy. So, guys, we're going to jump into today's topics, starting off with the top, which is this USPS phishing scam that's happening. These phishing sites that we see a lot out there. We see them, I think Google and Microsoft are a favorite target of these scammers and hackers, and also FedEx. I see DHL a lot. That kind of seems to be a top one that I see a lot of. And we also see USPS, and an interesting article that we came across where they're saying that phishing sites posing as a USPS draw nearly as much traffic as the official sites, especially during the holidays. And these scams aim to steal personal information or trick users into making fraudulent payments. So what do you think about this, guys? Interesting stuff. How can individuals and organizations better identify and protect themselves from sophisticated phishing attacks like this? What should they be on the lookout for?
Well, I mean, so right now there's not a ton of like software out there that's helping. I've mentioned this before, but we recently did a SMS phishing test similar to what this looks like, but we're the good guys and we're trying to see if we could click on it. We got 2/3 of the employees at a city to actually click on it because most people don't have anything on their phones to stop this kind of stuff. So what to answer your question, what can we do to like be prepared, to watch out, to be aware? We're going to need to have training. Your people ought to be trained, and it's pretty simple. Look at the URL and look at the entire URL. Being and like in this particular article you're talking about, it's USPS dash helpsend dash info.com. So the SMS looks, it looks okay, like it could be from the post office, but you look at the URL you're supposed to click on, and it's obviously not, the USPS, which is USPS.com. So I think that's the number one thing you can do, is just be aware of what you're clicking on and take a look at it and see if it looks legit.
And another thing is, if you're not expecting a package, do not click on it. That I've seen that so many times where people are like, oh, okay, Amazon or Netflix is like, wait, but it's your business email, and you're getting this type, and you never get packages, and all of a sudden this is coming to your business email. You should also be, uh, careful about that. Now, you said USPS.com. I actually thought it was USPS.gov, but you're correct. It is .com.
It's not actually part of the government. I think it's like owned by the government corporation. So I don't think they go by the .gov. But yeah, and also that's why it goes up during the holidays, because there's people that don't get packages, 330 days out of the year, but in December they do, because it's Christmas time, and you get, even at work, you get packages from like other, clients or people that you're customers of theirs. They send you like a fruit basket or something like that, or a box of swag or whatever. So yeah. But you're right. If you're not expecting a package, but what if you're like me and you get packages all the time? I mean, I get packages all the time, and I've got to really be careful that I don't click on these things.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
No, I was going to say this. The interesting statistic here is that from October 2023 to February 2024, this researcher basically looked at all of the times that people have gone to the correct site, and then compared it to all of the times they have gone to the incorrect site. And the difference is like 50,000 people. It's like mind-boggling that, so the correct site, 1,128,000. The incorrect site, 1,181,000. So people are falling for it. And I can imagine that, they're probably putting a tracking number, and then maybe they say, we can't find you, so please enter your email address or your password, or, asking for some type of identifiable information about them, and then taking their information there.
The other crazy thing is that same researcher found about 9,000-ish websites, URLs that have been registered or whatever, that are specifically for phishing for USPS. So apparently there's a lot of money in this, and the money is attracting the criminals to this, because there's 9,000 domains, which most of them probably wouldn't work if they had any kind of software on their phone to actually protect from this. And you can get software that'll do this. Bitdefender Mobile, which you can download from, I know for Android, you can download that from the Android store. I'm not necessarily, promoting one product over another, but I know for a fact that Bitdefender Mobile scans all the URLs that come in and tells you if you get one that's a phishing one.
Yep. Good point, Randy. So that's one of the things that people can do is implore some kind of security software that aids in you, maybe stopping you from going to a malicious site if you happen to click on one by mistake. But I don't know. Are there any other any other ideas that you guys have for maybe some simple things that people can do? Because like Randy said, like he gets he personally shops on Amazon 50 times a day and gets tons of packages himself. So we know the reason that cyber criminals do this stuff is because, your your you have your sense of awareness around these things is usually lowered when you're busy. You got to get from one thing to the next, and that's what happens to a lot of people, typically around the holidays. So with that in mind, what could people do around the holidays or just put in place now so when the holidays roll around, they have this thing in place that's going to help them, remember to maybe think twice before they click on a link or before they, respond to an email.
Mm-hmm.
Like does I guess like one thing that I think of, right, that comes to mind for me is like we see a lot of companies that are either required to or request to have those banners put across their emails saying like this originated from the outside or from a different domain than what it says. Does it make sense for people to find a solution that does something like that for them?
What's
Randy?
your question?
I'm saying, does it like putting headers into your messages like companies do? Does that make sense for people to start doing? So they have at least a reminder at the top of their email, hey, be careful.
We could do a whole show on that because yes, in theory, that sounds great, but I often will have CEOs reach out to me and are like, "Can you take these stupid banners off the top of our emails? I really hate them and they're really annoying." And I'm like, "Well, this actually points out that this is a this or this is a that." And they're like, "I know, but they're annoying." So I do get pushback from that.
I would imagine that after 5,000 emails of seeing that banner, eventually a majority of human beings out there are going to just be desensitized to it and ignore it for the most part, right?
Yes.
So those are kind of my thoughts. But any other bright ideas or sneaky ideas you have for people to like kind of like give themselves a heads up that like, hey, you may have just gotten a phishing email or a smishing text?
I mean, other than check the URL, check the URL and
do you guys like, I don't know. I have this on my phone. I don't know if other people even know that this exists, but on my phone, like if I get a smishing email or a spam email or even a phone call, I have software set up through my provider, AT&T. Like they provide a active armor security it's like an app built into the phone, right? And it blocks all these things, right, from even showing up into my phone. So that's one thing I would recommend people do something like that. I don't know if other carriers have something similar.
Yeah, I've had T-Mobile, and they do a good job with. It's kind of like that same thing, the banner ad. When you haven't received a text message from someone or whatever that number is, and it's for the first time, it actually will send a message saying, is this junk because you haven't kind of received this text before, or possible junk. And that's good too because with my bank, sometimes if I'm Zelling or whatever the case is, it'll follow that same thread because I continue to get the same message from that authentic number versus where all of a sudden I'm getting some weird number talking about Zelle, then my carrier does let me know about that. And I remember when I was with another carrier for an extra $3 a month, they would actually, it was like a more intensive spam filter for the calls and the texts.
Sweet.
Nice. So, all right. So moving right along, we're going. Anything else you want to add to that before we jump into what happened over at Change and update everybody on that? Good. All right. So, next topic of conversation for today in the show is this Change healthcare security breach, which we've covered extensively on the podcast so far, guys. And if you want to check out anything that we discussed in that, you can go back to previous podcast episodes and check that out. But at the end of the day, United Healthcare owns a company called Change Healthcare, and they provide digital services. They're like an IT company, a back-end IT company for pharmacies and insurance companies, and they were compromised. And it's being reported now. There was a lot of different rumors going back and forth about what was compromised. There were some pretty interesting vulnerabilities that came about right around the same time. So there was a lot of speculation as to what it could have been. But it's being reported now that, as Andre always likes to point out, Cybersecurity 101 has reared its ugly head, and compromised credentials, stolen credentials, that is, used on a Citrix portal that lacked multi-factor authentication. So like I said, the breach led to substantial financial and operational disruptions to the tune, like Andre and I talked about on the show last week. I think they're approaching $1 billion in losses at this point. And this just highlights, how critical vulnerabilities impact healthcare and cybersecurity. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? How critical is it that multi-factor authentication led to this attack? Basically stolen credentials and no multi-factor. I mean, it's basic stuff, right, Andre?
I just don't get it. You go on Citrix.com, and the first thing that pops out is there an application delivered with enhanced security, zero trust, and performance? This is what they do.
So I mean,
they didn't do it themselves.
And I'm going to get on my soapbox. I mean, because that this is one of those companies where if you talk to the CEO, he would say, 2 thumbs up, we're good. We have good cybersecurity, right? And I don't know, would any of you, either of you, consider this good cybersecurity, Randy?
I mean, you can't see it from my external, but I'm breaking my neck internally. I'm shaking my head back and forth so hard because well, I will say this. So someone that I know, I won't say any names, worked for a very large payroll company just in the last 3-4 years. And they were given a laptop from the company, which had like Bitdefender on it or something like that. And that's it. And then they had like a Citrix login. And the Citrix login was just double click. And then you entered in a username and password. There was no MFA whatsoever. The problem I think here is, yes, you go to Citrix website and it says applications delivered with enhanced security, zero trust, and performance. And you take somebody who's an IT guy at heart, and they're probably a great IT guy at heart, or girl, they're working a big organization, but they're not really security first. And they just get that Citrix for the employees and they roll it out, and they're not really thinking through, like, you have to think through your stack as you roll it out. Like, how are attackers, how can they manipulate this? What can they do here? Short story long, doesn't matter if it's Citrix, doesn't matter if it's, Fort Knox brand, by Citrix. If you don't have simple things done, like turning on MFA, what good is it going to do? And even MFA you could even fall even if you had MFA. But the crazy thing in so many of these big hacks, it's something that's really simple. Like in this case, a username and password probably off the dark web. And they just started, they got the link to log in. They just started trying. I don't know the exact details on that, but very similar to other large attacks. Something simple.
It's something our clients here in South Florida, or potential clients here in South Florida, always say as well. We have 2FA, we're good. But what happens when you're working on an account and you legitimately need to turn off the MFA to do it, and maybe the employee gets busy and never gets back to it, and now it's 1 hour, then 1 day, then 10 days that nobody ever thought to turn back on the MFA? What monitoring do you have, or alerts that you have that will say, hey, it's been 2 hours, MFA has been off, we're gonna just block the account, call us. And this is why you need, people like us to, put in those policies and not just depend on someone remembering to turn it on.
So I'm shaking my head again here, Brian. And I know I've talked a lot, and I want to let you chime in. But in the last 10 days, I've worked with 2 organizations that were hacked to get them unhacked. Yes, I was still productive while I was sick. MFA wasn't turned on hardly anywhere. Out of, let's say, 40 accounts we checked, different things relating to this particular hack, MFA turned on maybe on 2. I mean, an MFA is not like the end all for cybersecurity, but oh my gosh, if you don't have MFA, you're just sitting duck. And it's just, didn't we say what did we say, Andre? 2022 was the year of MFA. Didn't we say that on the podcast?
Wow.
Or was it I think it's 2022.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. So I don't want to go too much off on a tangent here, but I just think about a lot of the things that I've been involved with lately, especially when it comes to regulation and accountability when it comes to this stuff. And I'm just thinking about the broader implications, and do you guys agree with me on this, that we're going to see some people be held accountable for what's going on here just because of what's being reported, and because this was such, a lot of people are going to look at this and their necks are going to snap like Randy's, and they're going to look at this and say this was completely preventable and somebody was negligent here. And I think that term, like gross negligence, is going to be termed and used a lot against people as these things get drugged through the court systems, and whether that's through civil lawsuits, which are guaranteed to happen, but also criminal prosecution, as different regulations across this country are making it more difficult for CEOs, CFOs, and IT managers and CIOs to escape being held accountable for this stuff. And unfortunately, I feel like what I'm reading here is going to lead to, simply because you're talking about patient healthcare data being exposed here, and that's going to fall back on these individuals who are responsible for this once the investigation figures out who's actually responsible, which is going to cost a lot of money to figure out.
But I know we're picking on Citrix, but it's really at the end of the day change healthcare, because
100%.
Yeah, Citrix is just like Microsoft is providing.
Citrix is just a product. Somebody didn't change. You have 2 things going wrong here, right? One, more than likely, if the credentials were stolen, the credentials are probably very old. Like, they're not rotating passwords, right? That's what that tells you right there, right? And then on top of it, you have multi-factor authentication. For a healthcare company, with what HIPAA makes you do, those 2 things right there are a massive no-no. Like, number one, you need to be rotating your credentials, and number 2, you got to have multi-factor on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So
also, there's a lot of sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so this is just going to be interesting to see where this all ends up for them.
Well,
it's not going to be good. They're not going to survive. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's tough. There's a lot of
wait, who's not going to survive? The individual, not the company.
I think United Healthcare is going to end up having to sell this off to a competitor.
No, but remember, we talked about their earnings. Their earnings are crazy.
But United Healthcare's in general are, but this division, I think, is going to be in trouble, and they're going to have to sell it off.
I see. Okay. Go ahead, Randy.
I was going to add to your comment, Brian. There's a lot of talk coming out of Washington these days about, yes, it's just a product, but it should be sold secure. Where people are making the case, like, if they gave you a car and then back in the bag in the trunk were all the seatbelts and the bolts, and said, hey, here's seatbelts, bolts, and even they put airbags in this little Ziploc back in the trunk and said, hey, if you really want to be secure, put the airbags on and bolt down the seatbelts and all that, and then you could be secure. If they sold cars like that, they would get sued left and right. And I don't even think legally they can be sold like that. And there's a lot of talk on the, on Capitol Hill these days about doing the same thing with software providers and saying it's up to the provider to roll out a package that is already secure so the customer doesn't have to do anything, kind of putting the onus, just like on cars, putting the onus on the car maker, for providing seatbelts. And I know people will say, well, yeah, but you still have to put them on. Yeah, you do. And all that. But there is a lot of talk about these days, and that may change some of this.
Yeah, there should be could there be a policy on Citrix that after a full 24 hours, if something is not turned back on for MFA or blatant security, or, just like how they have minimum passwords, right? It has to be at least 7 characters long. So maybe something like that needs to be enabled for MFA, where in a law that says but then again, you got testing purposes and like all the different reasons of why, a legitimate reason why MFA may need to be turned on. But I get what you're saying. I guess that's why the pillows still have the tag that only the owner can take it off, right? Because you got to read that. You got to read that manual.
The 1933 Consumer Protection Act requires this tag on this pillow or whatever it says.
Read the manual of the pillow to make sure you don't suffocate yourself.
Always put your face up, not face down.
All right, gentlemen, good discussion. Moving right along. Let's talk about this whole interesting article that we found that MIT professor Stuart Madnick did, where he highlights new cybersecurity risks, including cloud misconfiguration, sophisticated ransomware, and vendor exploitation. He says that these threats are contributing to a significant rise in data breaches and ransomware attacks, but despite increased security investments, cyber criminals continue to exploit the vulnerabilities, especially in cloud environments and through vendor systems. Madnick emphasizes the importance of adapting security measures continuously, to counter these evolving threats. So this is something interesting that came up with me recently in a discussion we were having around CMMC, and how a lot of the language in a lot of frameworks basically just says regular risk, uses the term regular, whether it's regular risk assessment, regular pen test, regular, review of your disaster recovery plan. And really, it leaves it up to the organization to decide what is sufficient enough. So theoretically, if you're an organization, you're being audited and there's nobody telling you that you have to do this like once a year, and you're like, well, we do it every 4 years. Well, that's a regular interval. Every 4 years is a regular interval. Whether that's adequate enough, that can be debated, but it meets the requirement of the framework that they do these on a regular basis. So it's interesting to me that this guy points out that it needs to be continuous. And that's something that I think we're going to see a shift in cybersecurity here in the next several years. This whole idea of doing things on a regular basis to more of a continuous, like we're seeing it with vulnerability management, right? Vulnerability management typically used to be a scan that you did periodically, and now you're seeing it evolve into a lot of industries requiring you to continuously scan for vulnerabilities, right? So what did you guys see in this article or this report from MIT that caught your eye? Anything?
But just to finish on your point, so in the capitalist society, I can also see it where it's like, look, if you're not, keeping up your home or keeping up your business roof, and it gets a leak, that's on you to fix. But I understand what you're saying, especially with the word regular. And I guess the biggest difference is because it involves like consumer data, or or sensitive data. So I guess there is some type of responsibility that now this company has to have. So you think of it as code enforcement for your government, where if you're doing something, the code enforcer officer has to check off that you're doing that. I don't know how far away we are from that, but I think that may be a good idea. But I don't think that there's even enough manpower for that, right? Because again, regular, but who's gonna check it? Or unless when you get breach, and that's when they check it, and then that's when they fine you or whatever.
Yeah. And also to add to your comment, Brian, over the past few years, we've seen in the news, we've talked about on the podcast, kind of break down like how breaches happened, who got blamed, the finger pointing, and all of that has resulted in like rules that either they're getting talked about in the in the security section of IT, they're getting enforced. For example, like FTC safeguards rule, it relates to organizations that don't fall under the securities, but they're close in a lot of ways. And what do they require in those regulations? They require ongoing, because you saw in these trials over the past few years, people are like, well, we got set up, and then so and so said we were good, and coming back in and then requiring an ongoing regular cybersecurity risk assessment. I just think that's the way of the future. I think that's where we're going. If it's not even continual, I think that's probably where we'll end up, is that it's just ongoing and it never stops.
Yeah, I agree. So the other thing that the article points out is cloud, and what a problem cloud is becoming for businesses, and how cyber criminals are like all over this. They are just figuring out ways left and right to take advantage of people who don't understand the cloud, right? And what I mean by don't understand the cloud is they don't understand the relationship between you, the customer, and the cloud vendor that's selling you the service, right? So let's just take, the largest cloud provider, one of the largest cloud providers out there, Microsoft, right? And the different services that they provide out there, right? They are very clear in their terms of services that they provide you with a service, and their role in this relationship is to provide you with that service or uptime, right? So whatever you're purchasing from them, they're saying that when you go to use it, it'll be available for you to use, right? But they don't guarantee that they're securing that in any way. They don't guarantee that they're backing that up in any kind of way. They are basically providing you with a platform and software. And that pretty much applies to all cloud vendors and all cloud services if you read their terms of services very closely. Unless you are specifically told like, hey, we are doing your backups, or we're providing you a level of security with this service on above and beyond just like storing files or using this application or what have you. We're also providing some level of security that's very explicit in what you're purchasing. You got to assume that it's not included or that it's not part of it. So now the onus is on you to figure that out. So simple things like who's logging into that system and from where and when, and and are they getting in or are they being denied? These things need to be monitored. And if you think about all the things that you use for your business that live in the cloud, like think you might have like a CRM out in the cloud. It has all kinds of data points about all kinds of people. How are you protecting that? How are you making sure that somebody isn't getting into that and taking information out of it? Right? I know a lot of companies that have CRMs where there's financial information in there, what their contracts look like, how much money they spend, right? That's all information that can be used against you or could be used against your customer when that falls in the hands of a cyber criminal. So thoughts there, guys? Like that's how serious. Like people are not paying attention to the cloud. We see it all the time.
I mean, the last article we just talked about, Citrix being a cloud company is exactly how it turns here. And the sad thing is, no pun intended, you don't need to be an MIT expert to know this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and he in this article, when he talks about this, he talks about how 60% of corporate data is now in the cloud. He says many IT organizations don't have employees experienced in the nuances of cloud configurations and procedures required to properly secure data. And man, let's go back to 365. I love like technical things and, technical manuals and learning deep things like that. And man, 365, it is not something your average person can go in and configure. It is complex, and there's a lot that you can do. And it's, I don't know that any of us ever arrive at 100% knowledge of it. I know very, very few people who are experts in every single nuance of 365 that don't already exist, that don't already work at Microsoft. But short story long, this article's right on, is we just don't have the resources out there that exist to configure most of this stuff properly. 365, case in point, Citrix at the Change Healthcare hack, perfect case in point.
Yeah.
And man, we totally missed Andre's joke.
I didn't miss it.
I didn't hear it.
Oh, no, I got it. You just, you thought he was going to continue talking, and then you realized he stopped talking because his joke kind of did break up a little bit. So
I was waiting for that one too, man.
Your punchline, it broke up on you, Andre. The internet gods are against your
comedian's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
I'm laughing for you now. So laughing with you now. There we go.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Last topic here. Interesting one that I wanted to kind of bring to everybody's attention, and that's these new browser-based ransomware threats. Recent research reveals that modern web browsers can be exploited to execute ransomware attacks, taking advantage of file system access APIs to encrypt user data directly from the browsers. So this article bait that I brought to you guys is basically talking about how a regular user can go to upload a file in his web browser and end up with ransomware. And I think that that's pretty wild, but it also speaks to, I think, two things. One is, when people have to understand, like, we are in the way I look at things, and you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree with kind of this high level assessment of, I think, where things are at. But one is that we are basically playing catch up when it comes to protecting, like when we talk about these vulnerabilities, that's protecting basically the tech that we've grown up with, right? The tech that we've always had, right? And now we have things like APIs, right? Randy, you know this from the web world that you live in, right? APIs are a newer thing, but it's also becoming the norm, and it's being widely adopted. And there's a lot of different flavors of APIs out there. But also think about this from the lens of like AI as well, right? When we're talking about the race to technology and making things better and faster, and and that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about APIs and we're talking about AI, people don't think about security when they're building these tools. And that's the big problem. Every single day, a new tool, a new thing is being invented with gaping security holes in them. And that's what these hackers are doing. They're learning every day how to exploit these new things that are being built. And companies are still trying to fix the stuff that they already have. Right? meanwhile, they're implementing new technologies like AI and APIs, and an API that they could have built so one server can talk to another server, or one cloud app can talk to another cloud app. Boom, and now they hire some developer to build them some API, and the next thing you know, that API is chock full of security flaws, right? And hackers are siphoning off data and stealing data because the API is a problem. Thoughts on this, because that's what's happening here. Like, they're literally looking at an API and how these browsers interact with certain APIs, and they're saying, hey, we can hack this API and basically take over systems.
I mean, I have a couple thoughts. One, the gist of this article is right on. There are a lot of things that a browser does that you don't really realize,
Right.
like have access to your file system. The scary thing is if the malware can run inside the browser, it could potentially evade detection, at least from a file or a file signature standpoint. Now, behaviorally, it should raise red flags. And what I mean by behaviorally is if the browser tries to do a certain thing, a crazy thing, y'all know this. I mean, and by y'all, I mean Brian and Andre, but Chrome and Edge browsers, literally once a minute, they opened up a command prompt and they try to send a command. If you have like Threat Locker, which is a process blocker on your machine, you'll see where the browser literally gets, and it may not be as often as a minute, but it's on the regular. You'll see where the browser tries to open a command prompt and it gets ring fenced. In other words, it gets stopped from doing that. And it's a new thing that people have only been talking about for the past few years. And this article, he's talking about some stuff they did last year, but short story long, it's going to become a bigger deal that we're going to have to really get around, and security's going to have to stay on top of it. A lot of it's going to come down to what is it doing from a behavioral standpoint. And I don't mean to talk so long, but he did say, like, what if you go to a photo site that's a fake photo site? You just gave them access to all the photos on your machine, and no software is going to stop that because that's what the intent was. Anyway, I'll let someone else chime in on this. There's a lot here to unpack.
Andre, any thoughts?
I'm good on this one. You guys said a lot, and it's a reason why it's the #1 growing crime. It's going to surpass a lot of different industries.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, organizations have to be able to defend against these kinds of threats, right? And Randy kind of alluded to some solutions that he's aware of that would help with these types of things, right? So you're basically, again, this is how I look at it is you're trying to protect the endpoint, right? This is what we're talking about here, because the endpoint is going to be the thing that gets exploited here in a situation like this. So you have to protect the endpoint from these types of situations. And there's various ways you can do that. But, I think when you're talking about protecting the endpoint itself, a lot of research, there's a lot of strong research out there that says zero trust is the way to go when it comes to defending the endpoint and making sure that, when your users let somebody in, you have ways of preventing that, right? And that's what we're talking about here. Your users are going to let somebody in because they're going to upload a file or upload something and give it permission to come in and do what they need to do. And depending on what kind of reverse shells they can run when they get in there, it will really determine what damage they can do. So having defenses against those types of things, knowing that, your users could mistakenly open the front door one day and let somebody in, either knowingly or unknowingly, And I think in this case, this would be unknowingly. I'm just trying to, upload a file, or I think I'm uploading a file somewhere to somebody, and you end up getting, your files ransomed. So, all right, guys, any other thoughts before we round out the show for today? All
Like
good?
that.
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll see everybody next week. Remember, help us out, share the show. Take care, everyone. Stay safe out there.